When a woman is found dead inside of a water tank, the question remained, was this an accident or was it murder? Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Geetha Angara. Viewer discretion is advised. Geetha Angara was born in 1961 and she lived in Chennai, India until about 1984 or so. But while in India, she did earn her bachelor's and master's degree in chemistry. And she was actually the very first woman to ever do so at that school, which is pretty cool. She was the top student in her class. Geetha was an incredibly intelligent person. In 1984, she ends up moving to the United States, where she would continue her education because what she did in India just wasn't enough for her. She actually would end up earning an additional master's degree, and she also earned her doctorate in chemistry, specifically in organic chemistry. And she did all of this at New York State University. Eventually, she would meet her husband, who also had immigrated from India, and he was a banker. After they were married, they would go on to have 3 children together. And I'm going to use Geetha's sister. She had 2 sisters. I'm going to use her words to continue to describe her, because who better to describe her than her own loved one? The sister would say about Geetha that she was the brains of the family. She developed her passion for science as a child in India, and she would end up passing on her Hindu faith and belief in education to her 3 children. When her sister was asked, did she have any problems at her job? Did she have any enemies? The sister responded with, well, when would she even have the time to do that? She hates to gossip. Those things require an idle mind and idle body. She was always too busy and focused on the goals in her life. Family topped her priority list, according to her sister. Often after work, she would race down the Garden State Parkway to take her children, her 2 daughters, 9 and 19 years old, and her 13-year-old son to basketball practice, piano lessons, traditional Indian dance lessons. And at night, Geetha would cook tomato or lentil chutney or all-natural vegetarian pizzas. Geetha figured she could make them more wholesome, her children, at home. Geetha was always up by 5:30 in the morning every morning. She showed methodical care in all that she did, and she took very few risks. Her parents would end up turning to Geetha for advice about financials because she had been dating and eventually married a banker. But Geetha could balance the books to the penny. She was very meticulous. In 1992, the family was now living in the New Jersey area, because in 1992, Geetha Angara took a job at the Passaic Valley Water Commission, or PVWC, which was a public utility owned by Clifton and the neighboring cities of Passaic and Patterson. This is a facility that provides 83 million gallons of water daily to 800,000 customers. There was a point where Geetha was considering moving on from PVWC for better opportunities, but then she was promoted at her job. She also earned the plant operator's license. So in that particular role, she took the lead in transitioning the Tattawa plant, which is where it was located, from the chlorination it had been using to purify its water to an ozone-based process. And she was very, very, very good at what she did. Because of her meticulous ways, because of how close to detail she always was, everything seemed to be perfect when she was running things. This being a position where it was primarily men working at this plant, there were people who were considered to be very, I don't know, say like angry per se, but they were very resentful towards Geetha for getting promoted because she's a woman, and this is a man's world, I guess you could say, which is stupid. Now at work, Geetha really did keep to herself. She was so hyper-focused on her work that she really never had time to commingle with her fellow employees. And like her sister would say, she never got involved in any kind of drama at work. She never gossiped or participated in gossip. She never really listened to it. If there was gossip, she just walks away and goes back to her work. Her work was very important to her. She felt that she was doing something really important, which, she was. In August of 2004, Geetha Angara had been out of work for about a week because she had an illness. During that week, there was a discovery of a pinkish substance in the treated water. Of course, when she is not there. And so when she got back from that, she had to retrain several of her employees, which were primarily men. And a lot of the men did not like the fact that she was having to retrain them. Somehow it was her fault. There were also people that some of the resentment that was towards Geetha there was because, she wasn't white. She wasn't a white male. And there was some obvious racial aspects to it. And so when you have these American-bred white men not getting promotions over a woman from India, like I said, men. This will take us to February 8th, 2005. Angara woke up that morning. She did her normal routine. She got everything ready for the kids. She packed 3 lunches, one for her husband, and one for one of the children who was going to school. Geetha got to work at about 7:30 a.m., and this is confirmed by CCTV footage. Now, something to also point out before we get too deep into this is that there was cameras all over this facility, but not specifically inside the facility, especially in the area where this case would eventually center into. But they could confirm that they did see her get to work. She would have to pass a brief little security check to enter the building, which she always did, of course, which that's also captured on camera. So she arrives at 7:30 a.m. By 9:45 a.m., she's taking just a very quick breakfast break. And this is in one of the situations where Geetha would interact with her fellow coworkers. While at this little breakfast, someone that she basically worked over, she was not their boss, but higher ranking than this person, told her that there was an issue with the plant's filters and clarity sensors, and they needed to be calibrated, which records at the plant would also confirm. After breakfast, Geetha would arrive back in her work area at about 10:30 a.m. People saw her. She was carrying her clipboard. She had a glass beaker and her 2-way radio, which pretty much everyone had. On her work desk, she had her purse, her cell phone, and also a sandwich on her desk, which it wasn't wrapped up or anything, meaning that she was intending to come back quickly and eat that sandwich at some point that afternoon. But this is the last time anyone ever saw Geetha Angara alive. So it's believed, because this was actually part of her duties, she was probably going to be calibrating the water clarity sensors that her coworker had told her about earlier. Now, these water tanks, and I can't confirm exactly what type of water tank. The images I'm showing from within the plant, these are really just images for you to have a visual of what it looked like inside, but I can't guarantee what type of water tank this all comes down to. But these water tanks were about 30 to 35 feet deep, and you can only access the tanks with these little 4-foot wide openings that was closed up with a 50-pound aluminum panel. Geetha is a very petite woman. She's about 5'5", who is not really known for her super strength. And so to lift up this 50-pound aluminum panel would be extremely difficult for her. Not to mention, it's also going to be, I think they're screwed in. But that's the area she would have been going to when she just suddenly vanished. So a little bit later, the person who actually told her about the issue with those tanks ends up going back to that area, and when he does so, he sees broken glass on the ground, which he then cleans up. And this is only about 15-20 minutes after Geetha was seen going towards that area. At 11 o'clock in the morning, that coworker goes back to the other coworkers and says, "Hey, have you seen Geetha? I can't find her. I found some broken glass, which I cleaned up, but I don't know where she is." And everyone's like, "No, I don't know where she is." And apparently, for the rest of that day, no one looked for her. No one asked any further if they had seen her. No one inquired about her whatsoever, which was kind of strange. As a matter of fact, no one would even bring it back up until 9:20 p.m. that night, when some of the night shift workers noticed that Geetha's car was still in the parking lot, in the exact same place she parked in to start her day. And then another coworker goes to her desk and sees that that sandwich that she put out there that morning was still there, untouched. Her purse was still there, her cell phone, her keys, everything still there on her desk. Meanwhile, throughout the day, her cell phone is also getting several calls from her kids because she was supposed to pick them up and bring them to some kind of game or practice or something, but she never did. So her husband is finally notified by about 10 or 11 p.m. that, hey, there's a problem. We have an issue here. We can't find Geetha. Have you heard from her? The husband's like, no. What the hell's going on? So just around midnight, she is officially reported missing to the police. When they were searching the plant, and specifically in the area where Geetha would have last been seen going to, they find that one of these big, heavy aluminum 50-pound 4-foot by 4-foot openings, this panel, had been pulled off. Like it was not completely put back into place, but someone had attempted to. And the screws that would keep that panel in place were gone. They were missing. They weren't found there. With the exception of, I think, a couple of the screws which were found bent and broken. And they were found a little bit down the way where earlier that day, one of her coworkers found the broken glass, which they now believe came from the beaker she was carrying. Now, how that coworker didn't notice the thing was open at that point, I don't know. But I do know it's a very dark area of the plant. It's really poorly lit. And so it could be something that you could potentially miss if you're not looking at it directly. So after this, police require the entire plant to be shut down and for everyone to leave the premises so they can do a very thorough search. And but before they did that, they had them drain all of the water tanks as best as they could and as quickly as they could. Once the tanks were drained, they found Geetha. Geetha was found in the clear well tank, and she was deceased. In another tank, they found a shoe that would be confirmed to be Geetha's shoe. So you had a shoe in one tank, her body in the other. Obviously, this is the worst possible outcome. This is not something that people were expecting that they were going to find. They weren't expecting to find a dead body in this plant. Geetha was then taken to the coroner's office, and they found... So first of all, they confirmed that her death was caused by drowning. She drowned. But something the coroner noted also was that she had bruising around her neck, which was very indicative of manual strangulation. So someone with their hands had strangled her or attempted to strangle her. And these weren't light bruises. These were very dark, deep bruises. Someone with a lot of strength that did this to her. She had bruises on other parts of her body that to the coroner indicated that she had been struggling with someone. There was also what appeared to be, they think, light forms of blunt force trauma to her head, but it looked like someone had maybe not hit her with like an instrument, but more like with their hand. And there's a possibility that Geetha was unconscious or knocked out when she went into that water tank. So they think that someone tried to kill her, maybe thought they did, and then just dumped her body in the water tank and went about their day. Geetha Angara's death was then ruled a homicide. And now you have a true whodunit. You have a secure building where no one entered the building that entire day that was not allowed to enter it. No one there was a visitor. No one there who had been in there had not been cleared. Every single person had been cleared by security. Everyone who was there that day worked there, and that was it. And so with the possibilities of some random stranger coming in and somehow finding Geetha in this labyrinth of corridors and pipes and tanks and all of that, the odds are someone in that building, someone that Geetha worked with, killed her. So you have a whodunit murder mystery with a cast of characters of about 50 people, because that's the amount of people who were in that building that day. The other thing that indicated that this was murder was the fact that this 50-pound aluminum lid was removed in order to have someone access that water tank. They said there was probably no way Geetha could have done that because she was not a super strong person. She was very, very small, like I said. So they think someone with considerable strength had to have been able to do this. The police also asked, well, how come you weren't alerted if there was something foreign in the water. And they're like, well, the sensor for that particular tank, go figure, wasn't working that day. The water in that tank was 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius. So if Geetha went in there unconscious, she's just going to be floating in that tank. If she had gone in there when she was still awake, she would have been able to scream or at least tread water and call for help or something. But no one heard anything that day. Keep in mind, this is also an extremely loud plant. I mean, there's a lot of booms and pipes and stuff making noises, and so it's really difficult to really hear anything or anyone. Hence why they would have their radios on them. Nothing of Geetha's had been stolen, so this wasn't a robbery, nor would they think it would be. But she also was not sexually assaulted, so they know that wasn't the motive. But also, in terms of physical evidence, there was none. And the primary source of evidence would have been on Geetha's body, but because she had been in a water tank for hours, which this water tank also has other chemicals in it, like chlorine and whatnot, any type of fingerprints, DNA, foreign hairs, anything like that would be completely gone and destroyed. There was a very strange little potential twist in this. Not too long before Geetha's death, the TV show Law & Order Special Victims Unit would actually film an episode at this plant where the victim in the case, was oddly enough found dead in a water tank. Very similar to what happened here. And so for a second they're like, okay, did someone try to copy what they saw on the show? Because, they were here at my plant and they looked into it, but they're like, that's just dumb. They don't think that was the reason why this happened. So they had to interview every single person who worked there. And they found that for the most part, Geetha Angara, who kept to herself, was still well liked by most of the people who worked there. She did have issues with some people, and that was primarily coming from people who were upset that she was getting promoted and getting licenses and stuff like that. They don't like that this woman from India was taking roles that should have gone to them. Should have. But Geetha was the more qualified person. Geetha did not have the power to hire or fire. She really didn't have the power to discipline anyone either. And from all of this, the police came up with this. Their idea was that whoever did this to Geetha did not do so, they didn't plan it ahead of time. This was not a premeditated murder. This was likely a spur-of-the-moment thing that probably stemmed from an argument that this person had with Geetha in that area of the water tank, by the water tanks. And that maybe, and based on the fact that there's indications that she had blunt force trauma to her head, maybe this person just reacted and punched her in the head, perhaps causing her to go to the ground, and now thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get fired and also go to jail for this. The person decided to take it a step further and say, well, now I'm going to make sure she can't rat me out. So maybe that person tried to strangle her and succeeded in the sense that she passed out. Then that person, with strength, took off all of the screws of that lid, moved it, and then put her body in the tank and only partially put the lid back on because it was still kind of off. Now, it was off in a way that someone could have still fallen in there because it wasn't put back on correctly. So did this come from some kind of spur-of-the-moment work dispute? Or did Geetha maybe see something when she was down there that maybe she wasn't supposed to see? Did she witness coworkers doing something nefarious? And that coworker noticed and said, well, now we got to take care of this. Wouldn't be totally out of the norm. Things like that have happened. But who was that person who did that? They don't know. Looking into CCTV, they did confirm everything about Geetha arriving and checking in with security. But once they're beyond the security points, the cameras are very limited and don't capture everything. And of course, where all of this happened, there were no cameras. So they couldn't see anything. Not even like someone walking in a certain section that would have led them to that area. No cameras. So eventually they went from the full strength of the entire staff there, and they narrowed it down to about 8 potential suspects. These are the 8 people who had issues with Geetha in the past, who have argued with her, who had expressed jealousy, resentment, and anger about her promotions, about her getting the things that they felt they should have gotten first. Keep in mind, by the way, she had been working there for like 12 or 13 years, so she had put in the work. And the only motive police could come up with was spur of the moment argument led to this. And it happened from one of these 8 people. After roughly a year or so of investigation, they took that list of 8 men down to 3. They asked all 3 men to take lie detector tests. One did, and they passed. Another one took the test, was inconclusive. A third one said, no, I'm not taking that test. It does not mean that that person's guilty. It means that that person could be aware that lie detector tests are not that accurate. They're really just an investigative tool to kind of help push an interrogation along. And there's a reason why you can't use them in courts. It's because they are wildly inaccurate. But then it kind of just, from those 3 suspects, who, by the way, I don't know any of their names. They haven't released their names because, again, they're not actual, like, we think this person did it, we just need to get the proof kind of thing. They don't know. There's also things that they are withholding from the public that only the killer would know happened. So the full story, I don't think, is completely out. Police had theories. One theory, and I don't really understand how this theory even came to be, but in 1968, in the exact same area in Passaic County in New Jersey, a 22-year-old worker named Joan Freeman was found murdered at the Hoffman LaRoche plant. So this was very close to the water plant where this case happened. This young woman had been murdered. She had been struck from behind and someone slit her throat. It was similar. You had a small group of suspects in a secure area that only those people could have entered. This was a woman, and so police in 2005 were like, maybe there's some similarities, maybe this is the same. But 1968 to 2005 was a big gap. Like, I don't know why a killer would kill someone in 1968, then wait decades and do it all over again. It didn't make sense. Plus, there wasn't anyone who worked at the water plant who worked at this other plant back in 1968. It was a grasp. Another theory came to be that maybe Geetha Angara's death was an accident. And that's because one expert who did not perform an autopsy on Geetha, who did not see the actual autopsy photos, told one of the detectives that it is possible that a person could have bruising around their neck and petechial hemorrhages in their eyes who weren't actually strangled. Because that's a common thing you're going to see with strangulation. That in some rare cases of drowning, you will see bruising and petechial hemorrhaging. However, there were like 8 or 9 specialists who in 2005 analyzed this case, who did the autopsy or saw autopsy photos, read the autopsy report, who said, no, this was a homicide. Someone did this to her. But then the detectives now were like, well, that lid was open enough and there was a dark part of the plant where Geetha could have been walking and she could have just fell in. But here's my question. I do know, I was reading in a newspaper article that Geetha was not known to be a great swimmer, but she could swim. If she just accidentally fell into this water tank, right, and she wasn't inebriated, I go back to like the Elisa Lam case, kind of similar, where she ended up in a water tank, where she was completely, potentially out of it, going through some sort of psychosis, right? Well, Geetha was of sound mind. She was not on any medication. She was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. She was an intelligent woman. You know, it's like if she falls into this tank, she's going to know to scream and call for help. Even if she can't swim really well, she was able to tread water, right? And now there's no ladder for her to climb out of the tank, much like with Elisa Lam. But could she not have just sat there and tread water and screamed until someone came to her? It's not like she's going to tread water and then drown within seconds. Like, I don't understand that part when they're trying to say that this may have been an accident. My brain tells me that she would have fought like hell to stay afloat and scream for help. It was loud in there, so yeah, maybe people didn't hear her. Maybe she was in there screaming for hours, and eventually she just tired out and drowned, but because there was nowhere for her to like stand up on or prop herself up on, so I don't know for sure. But one detective now has this belief that someone opened up that panel and simply forgot to put it back on. But where are the screws? If most of them were missing, where did they go? And why was there broken glass? Why did the beaker she had, why was it broken several feet away from where she would have fallen in? What happened? What caused her to drop that beaker, to break the glass? To this day, about 95% of people, it sounds like, still believe that Geetha Angara was murdered. There are now a few people close to the case who are leaning more towards that this was an accident. To me personally, an accident doesn't make sense, but I'm also not an expert in this. So that's really just me with the logic and stuff I know and I have in my head. I have a hard time seeing this as a simple accident. I can't wrap my head around how someone would have deep bruising around their neck and also other parts of their body, fresh bruises that's caused by drowning. I've never heard of that before, but I guess it is possible. 5 years would go by, 10 years would go by. We're now 20 years later, and there's no answers still. Her family is understandably angry. They're upset. They believe someone killed their loved one, and most people believe that she was killed. She was probably killed because of a work dispute, because of some angry, jealous man who didn't get a promotion or didn't get their license and was so tired of seeing this woman from India do all the things that they wanted. But you know what? Geetha worked her ass off to get to where she was. This wasn't about an unqualified person getting a job because she's a woman. This was because Geetha was highly educated, very, very educated, multiple master's degrees, bachelor's degrees. She has a doctorate. She is super intelligent. She knows what she is doing. And she worked at that plant for years, and she worked her way to get promotions. She earned everything she got. Geetha was not handed anything. But here we are, 20 years later, still without answers, still without a solution. Someone somewhere out there might have that information. Someone somewhere out there might know the truth. Perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on the death of Geetha Angara from 2005 in New Jersey, please call 973-389-5900. Geetha Angara likely deserves justice because likely someone killed her. You can report information anonymously if you need to. If you're scared to come forward because people might retaliate, you don't have to say who you are. You just have to say what you know. Geetha's husband and their 3 children and the rest of her family deserve the answers, and they deserve the justice. So please, if you know something, come forward and help Geetha Angara get the justice she very rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case, True Crime Maroony Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Drop a like, leave a comment so more people can see the video. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the description of this video just below. So feel free to follow that if you want. Also in that link tree below, you'll find my case list. It is public. You can scroll through it. You just can't add to it. It is in alphabetical order for the most part with over 7,500 names. If you scroll through it and you don't see a name that you would like me to cover, please just send me an email. My email is also listed below. Just the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add that name to my list. I pick my cases typically at random, so I can't promise you when I'll cover that case. But if you are a loved one to a missing or murdered person, maybe it's a cold case unsolved, or maybe it is solved and you still want their story told, just let me know in the email that you are a family member and I can make sure that case gets a higher priority. But that is it for this case, True Crime Maroony. So until the next one, ta-ta for now.